So as you just heard, our recent survey of caregivers in the greater Madison area highlights the profound emotional, financial, and physical toll that this dual role can take. Through today's panel discussion, we aim to shed light on these challenges and explore innovative solutions that workplaces can implement to provide meaningful support. Our goal is to record today's session and then share this recording as well as key takeaways and valuable resources with HR teams across Dane County and beyond as they consider how best to shape their policies to help improve the experiences of their employees who are also caregivers. Today, we are honored to have a distinguished panel of experts, including Kelli, Betsinger, Diana Clark, Dr. Wendy Molaska, and Ellen Taylor. Thank you. To begin, and before we dive into some of the pre-submitted questions, I'd like to invite each of our panelists to introduce themselves and share some brief opening thoughts with regards to their roles and the overlap with caregiving responsibilities. So I'm not sure who wants to take it, but we'll start off on the end here.
Okay. Hello. Hi. I'm Kelli Betsinger. I am a mom of my son Noah, but I also have an older son. We live in the Madison area. My son Noah has cerebral palsy. In addition to being a caregiver for my son, I'm also a sister of a young adult woman who has cerebral palsy, as well as a daughter of aging parents. And what I'd say about caregiving is it's complicated, and it's the toughest job you're ever gonna love. And that's where I'd start, but there's a lot more behind it.
I love that. My name is Diana Clark. I'm the Senior Benefits Manager here at Promega Corporation. So welcome to our campus. I'm thrilled that you get to be right here with us. I'm thrilled to be on the panel today. I've been at Promega 8 years, and Promega have been in the Fitchburg community for over 45 years already. My take on caregiving is what brought me into this type of work was being a caregiver. I have my own children, and in my late 30s, I was a caregiver for one of my parents who passed away, and that was a very formative experience for me, having small children at home and caring for one of my parents with a terminal condition, and being a working person throughout all of that really just gave me some great insight of how are there ever enough hours in the day, and knowing that self-care falls last. So now as an HR person, I work hard to advocate for employee-friendly policies, help other leaders in our organization understand why this is a very positive workplace policy and how it's going to benefit us as an employer as well, and ensuring that we extend the right resources to our employees right when they need it.
Don't mind me. I'm having a little bit of a sore throat today. But my name is Ellen Taylor. I'm a dementia care specialist at the Aging and Disability Resource Center here in Dane County. So I'm part of Dane County Human Services. And in our role as DCS, what we do is we work with families who are going through the dementia journey. We also provide education to the community, and we train businesses on how to be more dementia friendly. And I also have a connection with dementia in my personal family with Alzheimer's disease.
Hello, I'm Dr. Wendy Molaska. I am a family practice physician. I have a direct primary care clinic here in Fitchburg. I am part of the sandwich generation. I have kids in elementary school, and I have boomer parents that are aging and having more medical problems. So I get to look at caregiving from kind of the little ones and the old ones and everything in between. And then in my practice as a physician, I actually have more experience in terms of talking with patients and families about what's going on in their lives in terms of caregiving, how to navigate that, and actually how to think about that as we get older and what we want in our lives going forward.
Wonderful. Thank you all. So I'm going to jump right in with our first question. That's going to be for Kelli. Our survey in January indicated that emotional strain, balancing work and caregiving, and time management are the biggest challenges that unpaid caregivers faced. Can you speak a little bit to how these challenges have affected your well-being and your ability to kind of balance responsibilities?
Sure, it is a balance. So there's well-being, and then there's also sustaining your home and your life. And being a complete person in that you are involved in other things beyond just caregiving. So volunteering, working full-time, it all comes together and creates a kind of a well-rounded life, at least in my case. I can't speak for every person, but trying to find that balance. But finding that balance is challenging. We've found that we need circles of support for that. So that includes the workplace. I work for an amazing company. I'm a full-time market researcher for Decision Point. I am passionate about my work, but I also have to be mindful of what's happening at home at all times. And so having good caregivers is really important to us. Having friends and relationships beyond conversations about disability or work is healthy as well. So finding that type of balance. But also, I think, related to the workplace specifically, what I've found over the years, because for us, at least with Noah, who has a developmental disability, it's really a marathon instead of a sprint. And so we need to take the long view for it. And in thinking about, it's all about planning, planning, planning. So almost everything has plan A, B, and C. Just coming here today had plan A, B, and C. And that includes not only caring for my son, but handling my workload as well. And my employer is just exceptional with that in if I need to work late at night after the kids were put to bed, that was okay, as long as the work was done and the quality was there. So that kind of flexibility, it made things possible for us. And then also just flexibility and understanding that, we have a caregiver shortage. I'm going to maybe need to take a little time off to interview another new caregiver and hope that they work out. And if they don't show up, that I can, work from home that day. I've been lucky enough to be a remote worker for the last 24 years, and so I don't know how I would do it in the office right now. But just problem solving around that. And also just having that connectedness and an empathy for each other. It's interesting because, I've been a caregiver for a long time. I've had coworkers that have kind of ebbed and flow out of those roles. And just being able to be a source to them and sharing, the emotional aspects or just hard resources. Like within our healthcare policy, you can go here and, talk to so-and-so at this organization, and it can really help you out. One of the organizations that I mentioned many, many times is Logan's Heart and Smiles, which I know Angela is here. They're an awesome resource. If you don't know them, please get to know them, because there's going to be a family at some point that could benefit from you knowing them. So.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and thank you for planning to be here today. We're so honored to have you, and thank you, Angela, as well. Okay, now moving on from kind of lived experience, we're going to transition over to Ellen. Speaking of some of those resources, can you share a little bit more about the community resources or support systems that can make the biggest difference for caregivers?
Well, here in Dane County, we're very fortunate. There are a lot of systems in place. The question is, where do you start? And that's what I get from caregivers all the time. At the ADRC, we have people who answer the phone during our business hours without a switchboard. You don't go through a phone tree. You typically would never leave a voicemail. And what they do is our ADRC specialists will connect you with whatever resources you're looking for. So people may call in and ask a question, but then our staff will also ask other follow-up questions to try to figure out if there's more to the story than what you're projecting. There may be you're calling for one specific thing, but there really is a lot more that we could help with, and we connect you with those resources. So we think of ourselves as kind of a one-stop shop, even though Dane County Human Services is very large and we're connected with everybody else in the community. It really is trying to take the stress off our caregivers on trying to figure out where is that first stop. So within the ADRC even, we have multiple different types of help available. There's the dementia care program I'm part of. There's also, we have a dementia support specialist who runs our support groups for caregivers. We have our benefits specialist to help with Medicare problems, Social Security, things like that. So beyond kind of those basics, we also are the entryway point for a lot of other programs, especially Medicaid programs. And then we also work with the focal points. So those are our senior centers and community centers that have meal programs, that have case management, that have lots of other services available. And then there's our caregiver support program. So what they can help do is connect with respite opportunities and some of those grant programs that can help offset some costs, because we know caregiving is very expensive if you need to hire someone. So it really is knowing where to start, knowing who the players are in the community, what are the different options for the life range. I mean, at the ADRC, we really focus on, of course, our older adults, but also people with disabilities over the age of 18. And also, if there are children who are graduating from high school, our team helps transition them to adult services. So we start working with high school seniors who have disabilities. So it really is, you don't have to know everything, and there's no way any of us could know everything. The idea is, where do you go? Who do you trust? And what are the options out there? And I'm telling you, there are a lot. So it's knowing that caregivers are feeling heard, that they're being respected by their employers, that they know that value that we shared at the beginning of the presentation. Knowing that everybody is valuable and what they bring to their company can really help help them connect not only within the company, but to the larger community, and that understanding and support. So that makes all the difference.
Thank you so much. So lots of community resources, just kind of knowing where to start. I'm going to transition over to kind of the employer side now. So I'm going to turn it over to Diana. Could you speak a little bit more to kind of what policies or benefits you've seen that have worked well, and kind of what Promega has been up to?
Absolutely. Happy to share, reflecting back on some of the other employment opportunities that I've had and the experiences that I've had working in human resources for different organizations. I would say across the board, one of the biggest things that an employer can do to support their caregivers is providing that flexible work environment and or remote work options. By doing so, when you look at a caregiver's day and what they can accomplish without needing A, B, and C, knowing that they have some flexibility with the work piece of it, can really be an amazing value for someone looking for employment or looking to retain their employment, trying to decide whether this is sustainable. Can they stay employed or do they need to leave? One often overlooked option is whether an employer makes intermittent leaves available. We have a leave of absence program, and I would say 80% of our caregivers who have a family medical leave open, it's an intermittent leave. They don't need to be off for 2 months. What they need is for every other Tuesday to be able to go to a medical appointment, or to be able to take a day if somebody has a fall or something crops up where they're needed. So just having that additional flexibility of putting an intermittent leave in place communicates that prior approval, if you will, for the necessary time off that comes with being a caregiver. And when it comes to, so that would be more of like the policies that employers can look at. When it comes to benefits that employers can look at, where I saw that our organization had the biggest impact was when we piloted in 2018 a paid caregiver leave program, which provided people with pay during those absences. Many employers say, oh yeah, we offer family medical leave. I bet you do. And there's not necessarily any pay that goes along with that, because sometimes you're caregiving for someone who you can't use your sick time for either, right? So now I'm caregiving, I need to take time off work, and I get that time off, but it's unpaid, so I still can't do it. It's not an option for some individuals. What we did was offered a pilot of 2 weeks of paid time off annually for our caregivers. What that did for us is, first of all, it opened our eyes to how many caregivers we had in our organization. We had used national statistics to try to, estimate whether we could afford to do this in the first place. But then when people responded to that paid time off, it was amazing. And the things we learned as an organization when we had that connection with our employee, because they would come forward for the paid time off. And sometimes we'd talk about it and they really didn't even need time off. They just needed to know that they could put some of that flexibility in place or know where some of the resources were within their community. They just needed support. And we opened up ourselves as an employer to say, human resources is where you can get that support. As an employee, come to human resources. You are a human resource for us. We are a resource to support you. We expanded that program in 2022 to 3 weeks of paid time off. And as of, in 2022, we actually increased it to 6 weeks paid time off annually for caregivers.
I want to round of applause for that because that is incredible.
Thank you. So we started out at 2 weeks, we increased it to 3 weeks, and then we landed at 6 weeks. And the interesting thing when we talk with other employers is many employers say, and we internally said, can we afford to do this now that we know how many caregivers we have? They're all going to get 6 weeks off in addition to sick vacation and personal time. Can we afford to do this? The reality was they were taking the time off anyways. It was just driving them financially in a hole. And that's what our managers said back to us. They're already taking the time off. It's just whether or not you're financially depleting them along the way. And so by doing that, we put that out there. It enabled us to connect with them. But one of the other things that we've realized, getting to this 6-week threshold, not everybody uses the 6 weeks. We prepared for that scenario of like, what if every single one of these people that we know is now a caregiver takes an additional 6 weeks of paid time off? If they didn't need it, they weren't taking all of it. They just took what they needed. So even when you put a benefit out there that's more than what they need, many times that person is just so grateful to have some resources available, they're going to take what they need, and it may not be every year, and it may not be the full benefit, but it really created a strong connection between us and our caregiving population. The one other benefit that I would say is worth asking some hard questions about is your EAP program, your Employee Assistance Program. As a benefits manager, I can tell you an EAP organization considers themselves successful if they have 4% utilization, right, in a year. Now, this is your counseling that you support your employees with. And we know our employees are struggling, but how many of them are actually calling the EAP to have that counseling opportunity? What we did was we took that counseling and we added in advocacy, which was really a broad way to say, we're also going to help you with everything else surrounded with what's going on with you. That means they can access legal support if they're trying to establish a power of attorney for a relative. They can access a Medicare benefits specialist who understands their parents' Medicare plans, right? I have a 40-year-old who, is an employee here and has our medical plan, which I can explain to that employee, but I cannot explain Medicare. Our EAP provider has in their advocacy arm Medicare benefits specialists that can help navigate through. Here's what your parents' plan will cover, right? And when you put that advocacy arm in there, it gives them an opportunity to take something off their plate. And we have recognized, so in 2020, granted it was a bit of an exceptional year, we actually had 46% utilization of our EAP during the pandemic. But on average, ours has increased to their standard is 25 to 30%, our EAP provider, because they have this additional advocacy arm, and our experience is typically 10 to 15% higher than that. Because our caregivers know where to call. They know the variety of resources available to them. So take a hard look at your EAP programs. Most of you already have them in place. Take a look at that vendor and see how proud they are of their utilization, and take a hard look and see if it's even in the double digits.
Wow, thank you so much. I think that's a huge takeaway for many of you as you go back to your own employers and work with your HR teams. Now we're going to transition over to Dr. Molaska here. You all just went on a tour, so a lot of that kind of individual contributor role of like, what do you do if you end up being in that caregiver position? So could you please share some practical strategies caregivers can use to balance their own well-being while balancing both these responsibilities?
Yeah, good luck. Sorry, no. I just have to say too, my dad was a huge fan of Dilbert, and one of the rat Berts was always, HR, how can we harm you? And it's like, whoa, your HR is not harming people. They're actually helping people. Amazing. So yeah, from the personal standpoint, I think one of the biggest things is knowing what is available out there. And it always surprises me as I talk to patients and other people that they don't know that their organization that they work for has an EAP program, that they don't know anything about taking FMLA, that they don't know what exactly their sick time and paid time off policies are. So part of it is just actually getting to know what your benefits are through whatever company you're working with, and then being able to, again, reach out to some of the assistance programs that are otherwise available. And so having, just that one phone number to call to be able to say, okay, yeah, I have, my parent that I need help for, where do I go now? And being able to be told, these are our options and have some of that direction. I think the other big thing is conversations and having these ahead of time. And so this is something that my patients are always kind of like, what? I'm 30 years old and you're telling me I need an advance directive and healthcare power of attorney? I'm like, yeah, please. So in Wisconsin, we are not a hierarchy state, which means that there is no hierarchy as to who makes decisions if you can't make them for yourself. So when I had my open heart surgery back when I was 30, I was single, my parents were there. I was like, my parents are my parents. If I end up a rutabaga, they're gonna leave me as a rutabaga, and I don't wanna be a rutabaga. So I had designated my brother and my best friend to be my power of attorney so that they would carry out what I wanted done if my surgery went wrong and so forth. The problem in Wisconsin then is that if we don't have a hierarchy, basically mom and dad show up and say one thing, brother shows up and says something else, and then Uncle George, who we haven't seen in a decade, shows up and says something completely different, and we don't know as your provider who to listen to and what you actually want done. So one of the things I talk to with families is talk to each other, tell each other what you're thinking. These are hard conversations to have, but having them with your aging parents, your aging cousins, aunts and uncles, grandparents, super important to have them with your partners to make sure that somebody understands what you want, and then fill out advanced directives, fill out power of attorney for healthcare, power of attorney for finances, so that when it gets to that time, they're already in place and you don't have the whole struggle then of trying to figure out, oh God, who's going to do this and how do we get this signed when this person has dementia and they're already told that they can't be signing, and then the courts get involved and it becomes a huge mess. There's actually a game out there that I like to play, and I've done it at like some events at senior centers. It's called Hello. Everybody likes games. Hello is great because basically it gets you talking about some of these hard things. So if you've never checked out the game Hello, have it at some kind of group retreat or your family get together or whatever. It's basically a little game that says if you were unable to wipe your own butt, who would you have do that for you? And as we sat around the table and did this in my family, my husband's like, I don't care, the UPS guy, whoever shows up at the door and is close. And then my mom is like, no, I'm not having my son-in-law or my husband do this or whatever. And so it just gives you that insight into what some of these other issues could potentially be as you kind of move forward. The biggest thing then on top of all of this is you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. And we tell ourselves that over and over again. And it's easy to get stuck in kind of a guilt thing. Oh my gosh, I have to take care of my kids. I have to take care of my parents. I'm going to my in-laws this weekend and they've recently had medical problems. How am I going to fit all of this in? But I have to find time for myself as well. And so however that works in terms of, okay, husband, you've got the kids this morning and I'm sleeping in because that's how I'm going to recharge my battery. Or, however you can work that out. And it's going to be different for everybody, whatever it is that recharges your battery. If it's, sleeping in, if it's a session of yoga, if it's, tinkering on an old car, whatever that is, so that you can find some space for yourself so that you do have that energy and that resilience to be able to continue to help care for others. And then I think, yeah, the employers are a huge part of this, and it's going to be interesting going forward. I love seeing all of the new flexible work environments, and just helping people to take advantage of that. And so when patients come into me and they're in these situations, a lot of it is talking about, okay, well, let's go talk to your HR. Let's figure out what your policies are. And then make sure that we work in that time for you so that you are taking this intermittent leave and it's caretaker time, but some of that caretaking is for yourself as well.
Anyone has any questions, I'll pause and let you all raise your hands. I know this is an overwhelming topic. I know when it first impacted my life about 10 years ago, it was like a flood of finances, advanced directives, all of these things that I never even thought about. A lot of the questions that were pre-submitted were those very same questions of, if caregiving hasn't impacted my life yet, what should I do to prepare? And so with that, I'm going to pause really quick and ask, does anyone have any questions? Go ahead. Sorry.
Molaska, it's pretty expensive. To get advanced medical directives and power of attorneys, you need an attorney to draft those documents. Are there resources available for that?
Yes. So Honoring Choices Wisconsin is through the Wisconsin Medical Society. And online, we have advanced directives, power of attorney for healthcare that are available to anyone, and they're in different languages as well. So I would just go to Google Honoring Choices Wisconsin, and it should be right there front and center. You don't need an attorney for any of these. There are caveats in terms of who can sign them. So if you are my patient and have an advanced directive, I can't sign as your healthcare provider because I'm your healthcare provider. But the guy in the office next door to me, he could sign for you. It doesn't have to be a notary. It doesn't have to be any of those things. You just have to have a couple of witnesses for that. There are attorneys that will draw these up, but the ones that are on Honoring Choices are really quite straightforward. Really easy to use, and they're generally what I've used and then what I recommend to my patients.
If I could also mention, for the financial power of attorney, that one is also available and does not have to be drawn up as a living will. There's a variety of options, and the State of Wisconsin Department of Human Services also has copies that are available and applicable as well. So Honoring Choices or Department of Human Services. And then for the financial, I do recommend getting that one notarized, just because financial institutions tend to want a notary on that particular one, even though it says optional on the form.
I see Eric nodding, so I'm going to assume that's a yes. All right, so one of the questions that was, I think, submitted 3 times by you all was, what advice can you provide someone who is not currently a full-time unpaid in a full-time unpaid caregiver situation, but also who hasn't been a caregiver yet, but what can they do to prepare? And I know you had mentioned, these advanced directives, getting your financial power of attorney in place. So these are all things that you can do today and that everyone should be, thinking about if you haven't already thought about. Is there anything else that you can think of for folks who either aren't parents yet and might end up being caregivers or have aging adults? Anything else that they could do to prepare now? And for anyone.
I'll take one of those in terms of feeling that kind of sandwich generation is if you're thinking of becoming a parent, finding daycare is tough and can be a problem. So preparing ahead of time for that. So when you're first pregnant, you're like, oh, well, this is 9 months down the road. Yes, but you need to look at daycare now. And then considering other options as well in terms of, maybe you have a nanny share with, the neighbor next door because you all are due at the same time or something like that. The other thing to think about is what does your job look like and what are your hours, especially for like daycares, but also for adult care during the day, because if you don't work a typical shift, that's going to be a problem as well. So if you're a single mom working 3rd shift, good luck finding daycare. Good luck finding somebody to take care of your aging mom. So those are things to consider as well.
One thing that I would recommend is get out and meet people. meet people that are in different situations than you so that you can get that full lived understanding. I love like having a proactive culture of inclusion and support in the workplace, understanding what your company is doing to do that, whether that's employing people with disabilities or volunteering at like sports. We were talking about sled hockey in Madison here. There's plenty of opportunities to get out and see what's happening in the disability community here. It'll give you a small window of what you may experience if you have an aging parent or if you have somebody that comes down with a terminal illness and things like that. And they'd appreciate it too, so.
Thank you. And then this final question here, I'm going to turn it over to Ellen and Diana, if you have any thoughts here. Given the rising number of full-time unpaid caregivers, what existing resources do you see that are most underutilized?
So I think there are a lot of resources that are underutilized. And from a human perspective, human services perspective, I think it's knowing what's there and being proactive, looking around, asking those questions, finding out what's available in your community way before you need it, because you never know. But I think that there are a lot of agencies where people don't know what they do. There's so many different ones. So finding those specialties, going to a professional organization, like let's say you're wondering about Alzheimer's research. Great, there's lots of options, but where do you start? So what we could do at the ADRC is connect you to those, but also calling the Alzheimer's Association, calling the National Parkinson's Association. There's lots of different clearinghouses that have federal level, not federally paid, but federally available resources available. So there could be then a local branch here. There could be, I think a lot of the national resources are underutilized because people look in their own community, which is great, but it diversifies what you have available if you look at some of these larger organizations. So that's just one example.
I can attest to the fact that FMLA is underutilized in your organization for caregivers, especially if you don't have any intermittent options. But even if you do, first of all, people don't always know they are a caregiver. So when you roll out a caregiver benefit, one of the things that we did not plan for is to have to say what a caregiver is, because we were rolling out a caregiver benefit and the person was saying, well, I'm just married to someone with a disability. Well, I just have aging parents. Well, I just have a child with special needs. I'm their parent. I'm not a caregiver. Understanding what is a caregiver, what does that look like? And when it comes to FMLA, it's likely to be underutilized because it's an unpaid job protected time off, and many of our caregivers cannot afford to take unpaid time off. Regardless of where they're at in the pay scale, the reality is they have their own financial responsibilities and they're likely paying for something towards what the person that they're caring for needs. So taking unpaid time off on top of it just isn't even feasible. So I hear employers say that all the time. Well, we've got FMLA, it's okay, we're meeting their needs. But can your employees afford to take unpaid time off? Or what I've also seen happen is caregivers drive themselves into the ground, burning their sick time for Family Medical Leave Act to care for someone else, and then get sick. And then they don't have a safety net. Now they don't have sick time that they can use for themselves. That was actually one of the biggest motivators for us as we started to see caregiver burnout. When we were offering it as 2 weeks per year, we were making those connections with our employees and understanding the depth of what they have taken on with their responsibilities and understanding why we were then seeing those people get sick over the course of several years because they weren't able to figure out how to take care of themselves because they just had no time left at the end of the day. So it always falls to the lowest rung or gets pushed to the back burner, however you want to look at it. So I would say Family Medical Leave Act is important. It's legislation that is very necessary, but it's also a limited resource for people.
If I could just add one more thing, bringing education to caregivers at your companies. So whether that is through a professional organization, Like, for instance, I've been starting to get requests for lunch and learn from companies in Madison, where I could come out if you're local. Otherwise, we've done it by Zoom if you have employees in different states. And it's having a 1-hour conversation about caregiving, about these topics as well. And you'd be surprised how many people show up and want to learn, or they just want to learn what might affect themselves in the future, even if they're not currently caregiving or caregiving for themselves.
Thank you. You all kind of touched on my final question here, so I'm going to just change it and say thank you to our panelists. If you want to end on one final kind of takeaway for our audience, what would that be with regards to caregiving, or how you wish maybe our communities or workplaces could best support our caregivers in our community? So any kind of takeaway or anything else that you want to share?
I wish that the communities and employers would really kind of step up into this space. One of the things that I realize as we talk about also like physician burnout is that the organizations don't always support you. So trying to take time off during a work day to pump breast milk when I had babies. Well, that's taking an extra 15 minutes out of your schedule, so you need to add an extra 15 minutes onto your schedule somewhere else so you can see another patient, blah, blah, blah. And that's just not supporting us as humans and supporting us in what we need to do to be able to take care of ourselves and our families. Instead, I'd like to see employers and organizations step up and say, you know what, hey, you just had a baby. What can we do to make your life easier? What can we do to support you so that we can make sure that you have longevity here and continue to contribute as in the best way possible?
I don't really have too much to add except to just recognizing the value of caregivers and the emotional toll that caregiving takes, and really putting a lot of value in that. And like we said earlier, putting that oxygen mask on yourself first and recognizing just that that's happening. A lot of people we see are in burnout and don't know it. And you can see that in the workplace, but you could also just see it in the general public. And when somebody comes to us already in burnout, it's really hard to put these pieces in place to move forward.
I would say one of the biggest takeaways as an employer is be curious about what your employees are experiencing. Find a way to create psychological safety for these conversations, for them to come forward. I had people who I found out after 3 years of offering this additional paid time off who didn't come forward in the first 3 years because they wanted to see how this shook out for the other people who raised their hands, right? And that's not anything to do with our company specifically. That's us as humans. If you've ever been burned, you're not necessarily going to want to be the first one to raise your hand. They needed to see people go through the process and still have that positive work relationship before they trusted to say, okay, I've been caring for someone outside of work, and I think it's time that we talk about it. If your organization is not in a place where you can look at paid caregiver leave as far as additional paid time off, I would recommend taking a hard look at your EAP, because through our employee assistance program, when we added that advocacy arm, we put a lot of support in place for our caregivers. When mom falls and now all of a sudden you're in an acute situation, I need to figure out now it's not safe for her to go home. I've got to find a place for her to live. We've got to modify, things about their home. They're so overwhelmed at that point. This organization that we use for EAP, you can contact them. They're going to take a list of those things. They're going to go do the legwork for you, contacting organizations like Ellen, and then they're going to come back and say, okay, for the durable medical equipment that you need, here's your insurance network, here's where you call for that. You gave me some requirements for assisted living in a certain price range in a geographical area. Here's 3 phone numbers of ones that have beds open that you may want to tour. Here's the follow-up appointments that we scheduled for your mom for her fall, because now she's got to go to PT 3 times a week, and who's got time to schedule that? That was all a lift for our caregivers, and it was just beefing up our employee assistance program. So it's a great place to start. If you're looking to kind of dip your toe in it, you'll find out quickly who your caregivers are in your organization if you get that opportunity to connect with them.
this is a great panel. So, and Diana, I have to say, like, your comment about like listening and engaging with your employees really speaks to my researcher heart as a professional, because I think it's about building a culture and understanding, and the more conversations that we have about this, the more helpful it is, because the solutions are not always something that's going to cost the business money. Maybe it's just going to cost them a little bit of education or understanding, or, you know, there's a lot of unpaid things that can help support. And the other thing, the last thing that I would say is Madison is a super dynamic community. We're really a magnet for families raising children with special needs, and there's lots of ways you can get involved. You could join a board, you can attend an event, you can talk to your neighbor. I think I said this before, but please get to know people and understand their lived experience, and then put your creativity to work. You can problem solve and find solutions. Many times in our household, we say we can do anything with a little bit of duct tape and a bobby pin and maybe a good neighbor or friend. So thank you for taking this topic on.
Of course. All right. Well, thank you so much to our incredible panelists for sharing their valuable insights and experiences, and a sincere thank you to Promega for hosting us today in this wonderful space. Today, we've heard about the significant challenges faced by working caregivers, the importance of robust support systems and effective workplace policies, and some key takeaways. We'll be compiling these key takeaways as well as the recording and sharing it out, as I mentioned earlier, with HR teams across the greater Madison area. We hope this will serve as a catalyst for meaningful conversations and the development of more supportive and inclusive workplaces across our county. Thank you all for participating in today's important discussion, and thank you again to our panelists.